as we start. All right, guys. So I think we are now live. So I'd like to start by first thank you both of you for joining this what we've been calling here informal coffee hour. But it's really a pleasure because I mean we know each other for a long time. So I will do some introduction. So my name is Ronaldo Menezes. I'm the head of computer science at the University of Exeter, and today we have with us two very good colleagues. And two people who are experts on this subject that we're going to try to discuss today. The first one is Professor Tshilidzi Marwala, who's the Vice Chancellor and Principal at the University of Johannesburg. He is a full professor of electrical engineering, the Carl and Emily Fuchs Chair of System and Control Engineering. He is a fellow of the Academy of Sciences of the Development World, of the Cambridge Commonwealth Trust, of the African Academy of Science, of the Academy of Science and of South Africa, and the South African Academy of Engineering. Professor Marwala has more than 5,000 citations and more than 100 papers with at least 10 citations. So his research interest is in the theory and application of artificial intelligence to engineering, to computer science, finance, economics, social science, and medicine. And he made fundamental contributions to engineering science, including the development of the concept of pseudo-model energies, proposing the theory of rational counterfactual thinking, rational opportunity cost, and the theory of flexibly bounded reality. Tshilidzi, it's really a pleasure for you to actually have you with us today. I will also introduce Professor Fernando Buarque, who's an associate professor of computing at the University of Pernambuco and also an honorary professor here at the University of Exeter. So Professor Buarque past positions included the Associate Vice Chancellor of Postgraduate at the University of Pernambuco and the Associate Dean of International Relations at the School of Engineering. Professor Buarque has 5 active international appointments in the Americas at Texas A&M, in Europe at the University of Munster, in Germany, University of Exeter, and in Africa at the University of Johannesburg, South Africa. So he has ongoing collaborations with more than 13 universities and as well as 30 students spread across the globe, more than 220 publications, and has supervised more than 50 postgraduate students today. He's currently a board member of the State Science Foundation in Pernambuco and the former president of the Brazilian Computational Intelligence Society. And he has advanced skills in direct international research project, large multidisciplinary teams, novel approaches, and cutting-edge artificial intelligence research in semiotics, swarm intelligence, evolutionary computation. So Fernando, really a pleasure again to have you here as a friend, both of you, and of course as colleagues. So the idea of this invitation, I'll start with that, is to talk about Industry 4.0, right? And I confess that very quick in this conversation, my knowledge of Industry 4.0 will be exhausted. So this is why it's nice to have two experts. So I'll start, I guess, maybe with Tshilidzi and say, why 4.0? Tshilidzi, what is Industry 4.0?
Well, maybe just to contextualize that the concept of Industry 4.0 was invented by the Germans. And the reason for that is because they would like to apply the technologies of the fourth industrial revolution to industry, to engineering, to industry, to manufacturing. That is why they call it Industry 4.0. But the general term that was coined by Klaus Schwab is the fourth industrial revolution, which is a revolution where machines are becoming more intelligent because of artificial intelligence, whether it is our phones, whether it is our workplaces, whether it is our call centers, they are all being manned by intelligent technologies. It is a confluence of various technologies in the cyberspace, artificial intelligence, blockchain, Internet of Things, in the physical space, strong materials such as graphene, and in the biotech space, gene editing, bioinformatics. The confluence of that is blurring the line between a human agent and a machine. Human beings can no longer be able to operate without machines. So we're being augmented by intelligent machines.
Oh, it's a very interesting point. So, Fernando, why is this the fourth one, right? And why is it revolution, right? So it seems to us that the technologies and the concepts that Tshilidzi will mention, right? I mean, some of them been with us for a while, right? Do you have any thoughts on why is this considered a revolution?
Sure. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I feel very glad to be among friends, fine scientists. Thank you. The question you pose is very interesting. And although I respect very much Klaus Schwab and also my German colleagues, I disagree a little bit of coining this revolution, the fourth industrial revolution. And then, of course, I had this quarrel with Tshilidzi before. I agree with the number. I think it's number 4, but it's a fourth human revolution. And I'll tell you why. Because, of course, along human history, we do have lots of facts that change dramatically the way we organize in society. For example, the fire, the press, and many other ones. But I do believe that before we had, as tool makers, humans, this is the reason I believe on this. The humans have been always tool makers. And then we started when in the prehistorical era, when we start producing tools for substituting our hands. But then for a long time, the tools evolution did not somehow change a lot the way we organize our societies until when in England, among the 2 industrial revolutions, we had another one that changed the fabric of society. We somehow started as agricultural group of people, and then we moved on to live in cities and to organize ourselves in other means of production, meaning factories. But that was the second human revolution to me. Okay, and then very quickly, because if you bear with me, from the first to the second, we experienced thousands of years. But from the industrial change in society, we very quickly, after the Second World War, we moved on a third new way that for the lay people materialized in the 70s, 1970s and 80s, was the coming to age of computers. Because again, with the computers, society reorganized itself, the means of production as well, what was value, quickly evolved from industrial goods to information. So we then had the information age, and that lasted for 3 decades at least. But currently, and then I agree with Klaus Schwab in the World Economic Forum and with the World Economic Forum that something changed recently. As a matter of fact, the term Tshilidzi mentioned was officially recognized in the 2016, 4 years ago, okay, when the forum, the World Economic Forum, recognized that the world has entered a new era, the era of intelligence. So that's our little bit of disagreement, but we agree that we are in a very exquisite time in which everything is changing, and it's going to change even further. Okay, but in direct answer to your question now, the reason we are dealing with this as a revolution is because it's touching all the sectors of society. So the ways we organize ourselves, and we communicate.
Yes, Tshilidzi. So I was going to.
If I could just chip in, I'm actually currently rereading a book, The Structure of Scientific Revolution by Thomas Kuhn.
Very good reading.
And in this book, he obviously introduced the concept, the paradigm shift. And I think, I think we can actually use the same analogy of Thomas Kuhn to describe this revolution. So at any given time, things are always changing. But many of the changes that you see are just normal changes. Thomas Kuhn calls this normal science, So that is when you are solving the puzzles, the little things, the machine is not working very well, you are solving it. Then you have something called paradigm shift, which basically changes everything. Then you have a huge jump, which changes every facet of society. And we call this a revolution. You can imagine starting to use machines to produce in the industrial revolution of the 17th century was actually a paradigm shift. Moving into the information age was a paradigm shift. Actually now making machines intelligent, being able to speak to machines and they can respond to you is a paradigm shift that is having all sorts of implications on our identity, on our world of work, the way we live. It is even changing our psychology and our personalities.
So this is an interesting point, because in fact it ties very well with a curiosity I have, right? Because I mean, revolutions, and I'm going to bring an issue, I guess, already in terms of ethics, right? Revolutions can be positive, but they also bring some drawbacks, right? So, for instance, it could be argued, for instance, that the Industrial Revolution, I mean, the first one, led to the growth of inequality, right? So, I mean, I guess if I exaggerating here, when we were all hunter-gatherers, right? At the time, I guess the society was quite equal in a sense. But then with the revolution, you start actually having people that maybe had more opportunities. So this fourth industrial revolution, could this, I mean, are we ready for it, right? I mean, what is there, or are there dangers there that we have to kind of maybe debate and discuss before we actually push this full force?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe just to talk about the issue of inequality. That yes, you are right. When we were hunter-gatherers, we were probably very equal, but our standard of living was not very high. Right. In fact, if you look at the history of people before even industrialization, it was cycles of famines. Because of scarcity. A simple thing like a drought will be devastating because the technology was simply not there. So if you look at the life expectancies, those things have actually extended due to these revolutions. You are right again that every revolution will have its own negativity. I mean, one of the big technologies of the fourth industrial revolution, artificial intelligence, just like nuclear technology, can be destructive. So we need to start thinking about how do we govern this revolution the same way we governed the nuclear revolution that gave us an atom bomb. And by the way, we have done very well given the fact that nuclear weapons, almost 80 years after they have been discovered, have not been used more than once against Japan. So this technology is going to bring also its own dangers. We need to be prepared for it. It is going to take away the world of work. We need to prepare people for the new jobs that are going to come into place. It is even taking away our democracy. We know.
Let me jump on this before you talk about democracy. So my point is, when we talk about revolution, Ronaldo, the term is very heavy, you see, so people may have wrong ideas. The point is that revolution, the term is used because actually it's going to change so many things almost at the same time that revolution is, I agree, the right term. But of course, Tshilidzi mentioned Karl Popper, Thomas Kuhn, but I would like to bring in Karl Popper, which is a little bit softer in terms of how the changes could be administered. But of course, this is not under our control. And then in this particular moment, we have really to adapt very quickly, you see. And back to the point of negative points, you know, recently I was reading about the Luddites during the Industrial Revolution. So there were lots of people at the time advocating that was going to be the end of civilization and things like that, because of course the relations of work and the means of production were changing dramatically at the time of the Industrial Revolution. So it's obviously clear that today many people would feel uncomfortable with the new revolution. But my point is that we have now the understanding that the world is not going to end because of AI, okay? Right. But as Tshilidzi has very righteously pointed out, we have to govern this, you see. And I would advance that we are not necessarily very ready for this kind of governance, because it's not as easy as it was with other technologies. And I'll explain a little bit later. I don't want to be dominating the point, but I am very much in agreement that AI is as powerful, to say the least, as the nuclear technology, with the difference that with AI, the changes may be so subtle, but so important, that when the things really emerge, the control is already being taken, like democracy. But let's save this for another round. Democracy is really a big point here. Go for it.
Before we get to democracy, I'd like to stay here a little longer, right? I mean, just a little bit more, because I mean, this governance issue, I mean, if you, and I had to do some homework, because as I told you, I'm probably the lay person here in this conversation when it comes to Industry 4.0 and Fourth Industrial Revolution. But I was very curious about the time scales of this, right? And if you look at what the scholars believe to be the first Industrial Revolution, it was a time span of 80 years, right? So 80 years, in my personal opinion, seems to be enough time, although in the scale of the university, it is quite quick. But 80 years is enough for people to adapt, right? So you had the introduction of machines in lieu of hand production, but 80 years, people can actually get training and adapt and find another positions. And then it means that you don't have as much, I guess, unemployment being generated by the revolution. But am I wrong to believe that this fourth one, we are working at time scales that are much shorter, which means that the idea of retraining someone in a period of 2, 3, 4 years seems to be kind of utopic. Am I wrong here?
No, absolutely. I mean, you are correct when you say that these revolutions are happening at a much shorter time than before. I mean, from 1700s to the beginning of the 1900s, the first industrial revolution. And then from it took about 50 years to move from the second to the third. And then, so the time scales are becoming quite small. So what it means that we have to start educating people differently. We have to educate people to be able to rediscover themselves. I'm sort of reminded by what Feynman says. He says that you are in no obligation to be the person you were yesterday, you know. And the more you change yourself, the better you will be able to adapt to the changes that are going on around us. And for me, I believe that as educators, we need to give our students education in its totality. And what do I mean by this? I mean, if you are doing computer science, you have to have in your curriculum social and human sciences. If you are doing human and social sciences, you have to have in your curriculum technology and science. so that you have a complete story. And with a complete story, you are going to rediscover yourself with ease than if we stick to the extreme specialization that worked very well in the first and second industrial revolution and will not work in the fourth industrial revolution.
Yes.
I remember, Ronaldo, regarding education, I have at least 3 comments here. I'll try to be short. But anyway, when I was visiting Johannesburg a couple of years ago, I was invited to deliver a talk in a very nice school there, St. John's. And it was a very nice opportunity. I interact a lot with the students, very high-level students. In the end, there were some parents. It's a high school facility. And in the end, some parents posed me some questions. They were very interested in the topic of AI, and they thought that was the future. And one of the questions raised was very interesting. The parent asked me, Professor Buarque, what do you recommend for my kid to be studying in this intelligent age? And then I paused for a second and it said, philosophy, ethics. And then the parent was very puzzled. And then I explained, which I am going to repeat here. The problem with this current revolution is that, first of all, addressing the point you raised, Ronaldo, it will help us on the filling the gap of the problems it will cause. That's the first time the tools we produce will be really at hand for us to remedy the problems the revolution has created. Okay, in terms of teaching, in terms of all details that I don't want to go in. But back to the point of the ethics, this is so important because if we don't think about what we can do with AI, we may end up doing bad stuff, you see. So it's very important for us to take care about humanities. Many countries have dimmed down a little bit the studies on humanities, and somehow they think, I don't know, the government think that it's not that important. But if we do not pay attention to education and the human aspects of education, we very well may lose contact with our own humanity, which is a big problem. But I agree with Tshilidzi that what we have to be doing right now is to very fast try to educate our young generation. And then my final point here is the following. When the information age came about, we took a long time to start teaching programming at schools. So, for example, recently, some colleagues said, "Oh, in my kid school, they are going to teach programming." I said, "They are 30 years late." You see, because what we have to be teaching now is how we are going to program computers that are intelligent. And by the way, Tshilidzi and we wrote a book on that, AI for Kids, which is very interesting
stuff. I was going to bring that up at some point, but yes, it's you gave me a copy. Very, very nice book.
Okay.
Yeah, so, no, I think maybe just to add on the issues of ethics, and the reason why ethics is becoming very, very important is because it is even becoming more complex. I am on a World Health Organization committee that is looking at the ethics of the application of the fourth industrial revolution technology. If we are going to take artificial intelligence and put it into our hospitals to make diagnosis, and it somehow makes a mistake, who is to blame? And the answer is not that simple, because in the value chain of creating that AI, there will be somebody who will go and collect the data, and there will be somebody who will take that data and use it to train the AI machine. And then you will have an expert who will train the AI machine, and then you have somebody who will take that and put it in the hospitals. So in that value chain, it could have made a mistake because the data gatherer did not do certain things correctly, or the person who trained it did not train it well. And it becomes very difficult to be able to actually track uniquely who is actually responsible. And now those are some of the questions that we need to think about. If we are to govern these technologies, how do we govern them if the responsibilities of decisions become very, very difficult to pinpoint who is responsible?
So, but
Well, let me just.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, no.
No, the point is the following. What Tshilidzi has just said is very interesting, because when you, and this is my connected to my previous comment, when you are to govern something, you always govern something that exists, and this is a problem because, for example, for the information age, the data protection law were very effective because you say, no, this data is not to be shared, or that one can be shared. The problem with AI is that by inductive methods, you create new data, you see? So the point is, if you protect stuff, okay, it does not guarantee that the new things will be protected. And this is something that we have really to think about, that our current laws are not enough to control, or to at least pose some accountability on people or companies. But this is a very, very interesting point.
But
I don't know if we will have time for that, but that relates to something that might be happening very quickly, very shortly, which is the digital personality. But I'll comment this a little bit later.
There is an issue here of course, I mean, I totally agree that we have to educate the new generation, right? But the people in the positions of power, I'm thinking here, I guess, government, they are themselves, I guess, not very well versed on the technologies themselves.
Oh, you bet.
So which means that
and by the way, one of the changes that needs to come out of this revolution is the character of the people who get into our politics must understand technology. Last year, I addressed a sitting at the Oxford Union. And I was shocked to find out that many of the people who were members of the Oxford Union, who ended up being prime ministers and important people, actually studied a degree called PPE, Politics, Philosophy, and Economics. I think the PPE of this era should become a PET, Politics, Economics, and Technology. Because and these people must understand technology. They must understand science. Otherwise, they are going to be illiterate in being able to govern in the 21st century.
Exactly. Illiterate in the fourth industry, in the fourth human revolution. So because there are levels of literacy, you see, and this is what we are missing. Go ahead.
I mean, I have many, of course, reservations with guys such as Mike Zuckerberg and so on, but it was actually quite interesting to see the position for Congress in the United States, right? When you see that he had to explain like basic concepts related to the internet and cybersecurity and so on to members of Congress. I mean, something that, again, although despite my reservations, I give him kudos for the patience actually during that process, because it looked like he was teaching people that were like, I don't know, 6, 7 years old.
No, absolutely. In fact, there is, I know China has its own flaws, but one of the things that China has actually gotten right is actually the literacy of its leaders. When Deng Xiaoping was modernizing China, one of the things that he put into place was to say that China must be governed by people who are technologically literate. And this was like 40 years ago. Now, as a result, the current president of China is a chemical engineer. He succeeded a civil engineer who succeeded an electrical engineer, you know. And of course, it makes sense, because if you are going to govern in this era, you have to understand technology. We're not saying you should be an expert in it, but it has to have been part of your training. You must be trained. Otherwise, you are going to lead people into the wilderness instead of leading them into progress.
So do we need to have some sort of, I mean, I guess quite fan of KPI, right? So key performance indicators, right? And I wonder, because I mean, if you look at the other revolutions, just to close the circle here, we have the advent of the telegraph, we had the advent of electricity, we had the machine. So we can point out to specific case studies that we know it worked, right? And
Ronaldo, before we move to this,
for this, yeah.
Before we move, I think it's very important to comment when on this deposition of Mark Zuckerberg to the Congress. Yes, he was very effective on the message, very professional, very etc. But it puzzled me a lot when he was coming out of the room, commenting to reporters that actually Facebook should be more family oriented. He commented that. My point is, of course, I agree with this, but my point is that one single person in that particular moment decided somehow the direction of almost 2 billion people. Do you understand? So this kind of governance, this links to what we have been discussing before. This is really troubling, because although, by the way, Facebook is hiring an external auditing system for controlling this kind of policy, but I don't think this is enough, you see. So this is my first comment on what you bring about. And then my second one is to Tshilidzi. When you mentioned Deng Xiaoping, you were talking about guys with the mind ahead of their times. And my problem is that this is not very common. For example, you have him there, you have Mandiba in Africa, in South Africa. But my point is that these brilliant minds are not necessarily very much in existence. And this is really connected with Tshilidzi, what Tshilidzi has said. We do need to educate people for the good use of technology. Otherwise, we'll be doomed. Okay, thank you.
So no, but Fernando, so I'm saying that I think what I was saying relates to this issue of educating, right? Because I mean, the experiments, or at least the self-organized ones, I would call, like the advent of social networks and social media, they don't necessarily seem to be a success, right? I mean, okay, we all use it. We're using one now. We on YouTube or something, but there are, again, several drawbacks on this. I mean, this issue of fake news is insanely important, right, for all of us. And how do we use AI to identify, for instance, fake news, since we themselves, right? So we don't seem to be able to identify a lot of times. So all of us can be fooled. But my point is that should we have one project, something that we can point out as a success and say, here is an example of something on the introduction of intelligence, and when machines they start thinking for themselves, that they take a more active role, and that could be autonomous vehicles, but I don't know. But should we have a case study that we can say this is something, and we should just imitate that particular example?
Tshilidzi, go ahead first.
No, absolutely. I know. I think what AI is doing to radiology is something that we should all be proud of. Studies are showing that AI is able to read medical images better than even experts. That's very, very important. It saves lives. It talks about how we should train a doctor. It talks about decision making. Of course, a human being will probably always have to be on the loop. I think we should hear more and more of these cases
Sure.
where these technologies are actually fundamentally changing people's lives. And I think these technologies have been very successful in medical applications. And then obviously, if you go to the issue of security, security of our aeroplanes and so on and so forth, that things that used to involve visual inspection by people, and obviously people make mistakes, now are done much more efficiently and effectively by machines. These are some of the examples. It is absolutely very, very important that we highlight these cases which are actually changing our lives for the better.
Well, I would like to complement that, but as Tshilidzi very well addressed, I mean, technologically speaking, we have already this success cases, Ronaldo. What, in my opinion, is missing is something of a higher level. Okay, so it's a national project that puts AI at the center. Okay, not because it's beautiful, but because it's the engine of this new revolution. But with a reflection, I mean, lots of thought in terms of what the society wants for it. Okay, what are the controls that should be in place, etc., etc. And then let me just give you some examples of that. It's too early to measure the success, as you asked, but the indications, at least, are very good. For example, if you take the case of some Scandinavian countries like Finland, okay, for example, the Emirate of Dubai, so they have decided that AI is to be used for the happiness of the country, like that. So it's a big leap, you see, it's a jump out of technology. So they select that AI is what is going to provide happiness to the population. And then I'm just naming this two, but there are other ones.
Are they providing this via the applications of AI? Or?
No, look, I'll go there. But my point is the following. They are not necessarily going on individual applications. So as a framework for their countries, there are not that many, but there are. Okay, they decided, and then they lay the foundations of how that could happen. For example, in Dubai, all the public service have to be transparent. Okay, all the databases, you like data, all the databases should be open. Okay, and the justification for it, this is really recent. The idea is that if they do that, an educated Emirati would be able to take informed decisions. But you understand that they are not talking about technology. They are talking about adjusting the legal frame so that when AI really happens at full, you have a reduction in social inequality. Of course, this is a very hard topic to discuss. And then they move on to other stuff. For example, by next year, the goal is for half of the transactions in the UoE to be using blockchain. Again, a move towards transparency, towards compliance, etc. So my point, not to go further, is that we do have some indications, like the case of Singapore as well. So they have a very comprehensive national plan for AI that includes the technological bit, but also the ethical reflections of what they want to get out of AI. And to finalize this bit, for example, you have in the UK, to my knowledge, the best institute working on that particular topic, which is the Alan Turing Institute. Thank you.
Right. So we talked about the role of education, right? But I mean, I think I if I understand correctly, you also worked as an advisor to government in South Africa in relation to Industry 4.0 and the Fourth Industrial Revolution. So what about the readiness of governments, right? So we gave a few examples. You mentioned the case of China, Fernando's talking about Dubai. So are governments generally ready? And maybe we can divide here from, I mean, all of us, although I'm in the UK, I come from Brazil, like Fernando. Is there maybe a mechanism for our countries, I guess, I'm saying the ones that are supposed the developing nations, to invest more in this, given that perhaps the big nations and the rich nations in the world are not investing as fast? Is there a way out of quote unquote poverty and become more developed using this technology? So it's a multi-part question, but I mean, it's basically readiness of governments and how they actually could use this to their benefit to get out of the status quo, in a sense.
No, absolutely. I mean, I would say that many governments are not ready. One of the trends that has been observed over the recent years is that there are two AI superpowers today, and this will be United States and China. If you look at companies that are harvesting data, that are gathering data and using it and commercializing it, you know, the top 10 companies will either come from China or from United States: Apple, Facebook, Alibaba, and so on and so forth. And why is it that the world is now gravitating towards a bipolar world as far as these technologies are concerned? And part of the reason is because of the combination of the citizens and governments that are simply not ready to compete in this era. You know, I would have thought, for example, Germany would have been a huge player in this area, given their technologically know-how. But, you know, quite frankly, they are nowhere to be seen. You know, they have done well in the technologies of the second industrial revolution, manufacturing of cars and so on and so forth. But if you look at a German version of Facebook or a German version of Amazon, it simply does not exist. You know, but when you go to China, you realize that such companies exist. When you go to Russia, it doesn't exist. You know, so and part of the reason is because we are not ready, and governments must become ready by making sure that they are populated with people who are scientifically literate, but also by investing in these technologies.
There is
some experience in Germany, and I'm just gonna, out of curiosity here, there is a work from a researcher called Raj Kumar that did on Industry 4.0, but it's basically a survey, and he was basically saying that 40% of the research that relates to the term Fourth Industrial Revolution comes from Germany, in terms of publications that have that in the title or mention explicitly this in the abstract. So if they're doing so much research, assuming that this to be correct, right? So why are they nowhere to be seen, as Tshilidzi is saying? So
can I have my go in this? I lived in Germany for a while, and overall in Europe, the society, which is very well developed, has probably created some regulations that prevent, for example, data sharing in volumes that in other parts of the world are not to be seen, you see. Therefore, I'm not saying this is the only cause, but certainly, and I read a recent work saying that in the public service in Scandinavia, one of the major difficulties they are having to put the service in another level is that the governmental bodies cannot share information among each other. So there are certain implications related to the regulation, which in Europe is very high, and of course related to the way people position themselves towards technology. Although, for example, in Germany, they have the best technological transfer network, the Fraunhofer Institute, somehow the transfer is towards industry, not towards society, you see. Whereas in other parts of the world, because of other reasons, somehow the society is more open to this kind of new technology. And of course, we can go on and on. I mean, for you to open a company in Germany is one thing. In the US, it's a completely different time frame, you see.
Yes, I'd like to bring some other topics here. So for our discussion, we are 45 minutes into the conversation, so time goes by really fast. So I'm trying to see if I can get a little more of you on some controversies. I don't want to end this on a bad note, but I like to actually talk about what I
already
said
did
related to possible side effects, right? And maybe we can do some sort of rapid fire, but it'd be a fourth industrial revolution in inequality, right? So what are your thoughts? I mean, is it going to get better or is it going to get worse? So if you were to just focus on that, right?
Well, it is quite clear that if the economic model, remain as it is, in an era where there is a rapid automation of the means of production, that absolutely inequality is going to go up. And people have been thinking about this. How do we deal with this? So I read a solution that was that a South African inventor, Elon Musk, came up with, the universal basic income. Of course, he was not an inventor of the universal basic income. Thomas Paine was probably the person who came up with that terminology. Now, the problem is that the tax base is going to reduce because all this huge amount of people who used to pay personal tax will no longer pay personal tax. So again, the economy will be in a crisis. And then I read again, Bill Gates now saying that no, then we should start taxing robots. Robots must start paying tax. But the problem is that in the fourth industrial revolution, it is becoming increasingly difficult to know what is a robot and what is not a robot. Our watches are speaking to us. Are they robots? Of course they have robotic features. How do you tax that feature amongst others? So I guess what I'm trying to say is that to deal with the negative consequences of these technological developments will require more than technology. It will require us to rethink the way we reorganize our society.
Well, Tshilidzi, you took 2 points I would like to address. Basic income, Ronaldo, would probably be the solution for the crisis AI will create. Okay, but the countermeasure is to tax robots. That's the point. But as you were talking about problems of the fourth human revolution, I would like to address the threats to democracy. Because
point, but go ahead.
Yeah, but my point is this, you see, because as we are now having robots able to generate content, okay, and to select to whom those should be addressed to and when, basically you are able to influence people, and then it's not kind of a secret anymore that AI has changed the results of elections in various countries, in Africa, in South America, and in North America. Okay, that's a fact. We have to really be very aware of this real threat. And of course, the solution always come back to the point of education. If you have an educated society, okay, the plague of fake news, for example, even if it's very elaborate, okay, will no longer prevail, all right? And of course, inequality is a endogenous problem for the model we select for our society. I was rereading Thomas Piketty, and the data of the book, I mean, the text is brilliant, okay? And I agree with Tshilidzi. If nothing changes, the inequality will grow, not to reduce, which is even worse, all right? But again, if we don't care about the education of people on how to use these tools, even if we establish the minimum income, okay, people in the end will do not know what to do with their money coming for free, you see. And it's a problem, to my opinion, very simple to solve. It's a heavy investment in education of people in terms of solving problems, in analytical abilities, philosophical reflections, which in certain countries it's not very fancy. Okay, so
Tshilidzi, this ties with what the second point I was going to bring, which I think you seem to be passionate about, which is this machines in control, right? So are we really ready to have this? Because it seems to me like ages, but probably not. That people say, well, we're going to have driverless cars. Are we really likely to have machines in control of our democracy, machines in control of our cars, machine control of our decisions on what we eat? Is this where this will lead?
Yeah, no, I think machines are in many ways in control. I think the issue is the extent. I think the issue is the extent of the control. If you are sitting in a car now, many cars have all sorts of sensors that are doing things that you were supposed to do. The reason why we don't look at it as being in control is because we still have the steering wheel. Many of us still have a steering wheel. I guess what I'm trying to say is that they don't have to have a steering wheel to be in control.
So you're saying that we have the illusion of control? Is this what we have right now? We think we are in control, but perhaps
no.
Not?
I think our span of control is actually being taken away from us. Just look at the stock market. I mean, the London stock market. How many people are literally just sitting down and taking decisions without a machine? I mean, in fact, now they even have something called high frequency trading, which is algorithmic trading.
Driven.
But if you go and ask those people there and say, are machines in control of our markets? They will say no. And the reason for that is because, and I guess this is what I call total control. When somebody controls and you yourself do not know that your mechanisms of control are being taken away. But the good thing about machine control is that machines are actually more rational than human beings. They are more rational than...
Oh, I want to say something there.
Yeah.
Okay, so my point is the following. Have you finished, Tshilidzi?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, the point is the following. I agree with you. In terms of logic, okay, if you put a person and a machine is completely rational, and humans are not that rational. Then you have to wonder what is the purpose of to be a human and to be a machine. So for the purpose of being a machine, the fact that they are fully rational, okay, makes them very excellent machines. Okay, but for us, okay, we as humans, we take decisions that are not fully rational. And sometimes it apparently, under a certain frame of reference, it seems wrong. But this is precisely the exercise of things like freedom, free will, and other dimensions that machines are not supposed, at least now, to be scrutinized upon, you see. So the way out of this conundrum is exactly to put the human in the loop. So that is the way out of this revolution without big problems. If you allow the machines to take the control and give the humans somehow not the full control, but somehow to indicate directions, we may have a chance, okay, to come out of this revolution and become better societies.
So
Either extremes are no-go zones, in my opinion.
it would be nice to actually have some sort of social experiment on a country, because we see that it seems that to achieve the full potential, we need government's education. So everything has to come together. In fact, there's a comment on YouTube, right, that basically said, I think translate what we're discussing here in terms of, this is from Marcos Oliveira, saying, we're talking about inequality, but if the machines are generating the wealth, right, then how about having something like an 100% inheritance tax? Because the wealth is being generated not by you, which means that perhaps you don't have to pass this on to your
Piketty is very how can I say, positive towards a change towards inheritance. I think that's the way, in his opinion, to remedy the current economic problems of inequality. But the problem here, Ronaldo, is really how to strike this balance, you see, because at the pace we are at the moment, the change in society and in the economy driven by AI will be catastrophic for certain sectors, you see. Either we refrain a little bit the change, or we have to really have a B plan in place, because there will be a crash in certain sectors.
Yeah, the concern, I mean, I'm sitting, the reason I started with this inequality and the role of this, perhaps to reduce it, is because, of course, from my upbringing, I'm concerned that certain regions of the world, they have not even reached the third industrial revolution yet, right? And so, I mean, when you talk about digital technology and so on, so there are many areas in the world that are not there. There are many areas in the world that don't have electricity. So which means that they might even not have reached the second industrial revolution. So I think it is a moral obligation. And I think this is what I like to end in terms of your thoughts, in terms of social responsibility of everybody involved, right? To make sure that we use this new, those new technologies for the betterment of society as a whole, and not only for perpetuating, I guess, the mistakes, quote unquote, that we had from the past. So probably end there and have your last thoughts, because I mean, I know that you're all busy. Any last thoughts on social responsibility and how do we move forward with this? I'll start with you, Fernando.
Well, I would like to say that at the moment we have this habit of trying to regulate things, at least the world that abide to the Roman law, to regulate stuff, I mean, or crime, before it happens. You live in a country in which the logic is not like that. But the problem is you cannot regulate ethics and morality, okay? You do that via education, which is something as a soft control. And the problem is, if you don't do that, and it takes a long time, you see, it's not something that you just decide and the next day it's ready. It's not. To educate a human being in moral terms, okay, so it takes at least 15 years. But at the pace we are, and this is the biggest problem, how we reconcile these two processes that have completely different time scales. And the politicians at the moment, they think they have this wild dream of controlling the revolution using law. It's not a possibility. So my final point here is for us to really reflect on what we can do without interfering with other people's life. Okay, I think Immanuel Kant has produced one of the most interesting tools for us to assess, which is the categorical universal. So the idea that you do something if it's good for you, but you position yourself in place of the other person, and if it's good for that person as well, then you go ahead. So if we use tricks like that, which is purely philosophical, so we might have a chance.
Thank you, Fernando. Tshilidzi, some final thoughts on the topic?
No, absolutely. I think we should be vigilant. I think we need to understand these technologies. I think we need to understand what they do. I think we need to understand the implications of these technologies on society. And most importantly, to construct a new society that will be able to deal with the negative consequences of these technologies. And also construct a new society that will be able to take advantage of the good things that come out of this technology. Thank you very much.
So look, it's a fascinating subject. I think we all, in one way or the other, I mean, I was trying to avoid the next time we talk, I'll bring the issue of data, which is more like close to me than the AI itself, right? Because I mean, data gathering is part of the Industrial Revolution, but I'll leave this for our conversation 2.0 in the future. I'm hoping that this is the beginning. I mean, we've been talking, us three, to have some sort of collaboration between our institutions, and I know that it's just an issue of time until this is actually realized. So I appreciate the people that watched us on YouTube, and thank you a lot for your time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Take care, guys.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you.